This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to showcase the quintessential cards needed to build the core of an Abzan EDH deck with the partner pair of Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, and Sam, Loyal Attendant, as the generals. Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, and Sam, Loyal Attendant, debuted in Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. Frodo was a 1/3 halfling scout with vigilance for Orzhov colors, that's 1 white and 1 black mana, and partners with Sam, while Sam is a 2/4 halfling peasant for 1 in Selesnya colors, which is green and white, and partners with Frodo. The partner with mechanic represents 2 abilities. The first is a triggered ability. When the permanent with partner with enters the battlefield, target player may search their library for the legendary card with which it is partnered, reveal it, and put it into their hand. The second ability modifies the rules for deck construction in the EDH format. If a legendary creature with partner with is designated as our commander, then the legendary card with which it is partnered can also be designated as our commander. For the purposes of crafting the core of this build, both Frodo and Sam would begin the game in the command zone together, which somewhat nullifies the aforementioned triggered ability of the partner with mechanic, unless we somehow allow one of our commanders to be put into, on top of, or on the bottom of our library. Let's plan to return our commanders to the command zone instead of putting them into our library. Speaking of our commanders, whenever Frodo attacks, if we gained at least 3 life this turn, the ring tempts us. If we choose Frodo to become or remain our ring bearer, and the ring has tempted us at least 2 times this game, then we draw a card. At the beginning of combat on our turn, Sam creates a food token, for which we can pay 2 generic mana, tap, and sacrifice to gain 3 life. Sam also reduces the activated abilities of foods we control by 1 generic mana. When our commanders are paired together, we want to draw a card from Frodo's ability by attacking with him and getting tempted by the ring. However, if we haven't gained at least 3 life by the time Frodo attacks, his ability will not trigger at all. Sam, through his food-creating ability, provides an outlet to gain this life, and he also provides a cost reduction for doing so. Note that Sam triggers at the beginning of combat on our turn and produces a food token, for which we can pay just 1 mana, tap, and sacrifice to gain 3 life prior to declaring attackers. Then we can declare Frodo as an attacker, and having gained the necessary 3 life from Sam's recently created and sacrificed food token, the ring tempts us. As the ring tempts us, we get an emblem named the Ring if we do not already have one. Then the ring gains its next ability, and we choose a creature we control to become or remain our ring bearer. The ring can tempt us even if we do not control a creature, and each time it tempts us, we must choose a creature if we control one. The ring gains its abilities from top to bottom, and once it gains an ability, it has that ability for the rest of the game. For example, if the ring has tempted us at least 4 times in a game, then each temptation thereafter allows us to choose a creature we control to become or remain our ring bearer. Our ring bearer cannot be blocked by creatures with greater power. Whenever it attacks, we draw a card and discard a card. Whenever it becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. Each player can only have 1 emblem named the Ring, and only 1 ring bearer at a time. So if we choose Frodo to become or remain our ring bearer, when he attacks, then we draw a card as long as the ring has tempted us at least twice during the game. Pairing Frodo and Sam together creates a ring-driven value engine from which our opponents will not be able to overcome. particularly after we sculpt the core of this build to strengthen and enhance this halfling dynamic. Since gaining life is integral to being tempted by the ring through Frodo's ability, let's include some additional ways to create food tokens in case Sam is indisposed or languishing in the command zone due to overtaxation. We can inundate our side of the battlefield with halflings and foods with Farmer Cotton. When he enters the battlefield, we create X 1/1 white halfling creature tokens and X food tokens. When the first lower counter is placed onto of herbs and stewed rabbit, we put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature, and we create a food token. Chapter 2 of this saga has us draw a card, and we create another food token. When the third and final lower counter is placed onto it, we create a 1/1 white halfling creature token for each food we control. Through this enchantment, we can create another bevy of halfling creature tokens. Through Tireless Provisioner's landfall ability, whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we either create a food token or a treasure token. Treasures can be tapped and sacrificed to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, Samwise Gamgee creates a food token. We can also sacrifice 3 foods to return target historic card from our graveyard to our hand. Historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Here we can use our foods to recur various cards from our graveyard. Whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, Rapacious Guest creates a food token. Whenever we sacrifice a food token, we put a +1/+1 counter on Rapacious Guest. When this halfling citizen leaves the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to her power. Rapacious Guest could knock down an opponent's life total in a big way. Whenever one or more halflings we control attacks a player, Meriadoc Brandbuck creates a food token. Note that these halflings do not need to deal combat damage in order for Meriadoc's ability to trigger. They just need to be declared as attackers, and we get a food token. Speaking of tokens, if one or more tokens would be created under our control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created instead with Peregrine Took. Since being tempted by the ring is also integral to the theme of this deck, let's include some additional ways of getting tempted by the ring in case Frodo is indisposed or languishing in the command zone due to overtaxation. Samwise the Stout-Hearted has Flash, and when he enters the battlefield, we choose up to 1 target permanent card in our graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. We return it to our hand, and the ring tempts us. Although this effect is just a one-and-done ring temptation, we do reap the peripheral benefit of recurring a permanent card from our graveyard. If Frodo, Sauron's Bane, is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness of 2/3 and has lifelink. We can do this by paying 2 mana in any combination of Orzhov colors. For 3 black mana, if Frodo is a scout, then he becomes a halfling rogue with, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted us at least 4 times this game. Otherwise, the ring tempts us. This iteration of Frodo is considered a win condition in this build. At the beginning of our end step, if a creature died under our control this turn, then Schmeagol, Helpful Guide, has the ring tempt us. Whenever the ring tempts us, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card. We put that card onto the battlefield tapped and under our control, and the rest of the cards are put into their graveyard. Let's be sure to heighten our mindfulness to any graveyard-centric builds that our opponents may be piloting. We do not want to help them fill their graveyard through Schmeagol's abilities. Whenever Frodo Baggins or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under our control, the ring tempts us. As long as this version of Frodo is our ring bearer, he must be blocked if able. At the beginning of our upkeep, Call of the Ring has the ring tempt us. Whenever we choose a creature as our ring bearer, we may pay 2 generic mana. If we do, then we draw a card. Sacrificing foods is a great way to gain the life needed to trigger Frodo's ability. And since we have a food focus in the core of this build, let's include some cards that synergize with our food tokens. Whenever we create or sacrifice a token, Mirkwood Bats has each opponent lose 1 life. Whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, Nadir's Nightblade also has each opponent lose 1 life, and we gain 1 life. Cauldron Familiar follows suit. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, and we gain 1 life. We can also sacrifice a food to return Cauldron Familiar from our graveyard to the battlefield. Although these cards are merely commons, they can be considered win conditions in this build. If we would create a clue, food, or treasure token, then Academy Manufacturer creates one of each instead. We can pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice a clue token to draw a card. If one or more tokens would be created under our control, those tokens are created, and Chatterfang Squirrel General creates that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, which is a great way to inundate our side of the battlefield with a scurry of squirrels with which to chump block or attack our opponents. Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, gives tokens we control the ability to tap to add 1 green mana to our mana pool. Jaheira allows us to use any of our tokens for the purposes of ramping, and not just foods. Pippin, Warden of Isengard, and Mary, Warden of Isengard, partner with each other. Remember, when a creature with Partner With enters the battlefield, target player may put the creature with which it is partnered into their hand from their library. We can pay 1 generic mana and tap Pippin to create a food token, or we can tap Pippin and sacrifice 4 foods to give other creatures we control +3/+3 and haste until end of turn. This is an ability we can only activate as a sorcery. Whenever one or more artifacts enter the battlefield under our control, Mary creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. Although this ability only triggers once per turn, we should be able to trigger it multiple times during a round of turns. When Rosie Cotton of South Lane, Experimental Confectioner, and Knight of the Sweet's Revenge enter the battlefield, we create a food token. Whenever we create a token, Rosie has us put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control other than her. Rosie should dole out a lot of +1/+1 counters in this type of build. Whenever we sacrifice a food, Experimental Confectioner creates a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature cannot block. We can pay 5 and 2 green mana and sacrifice Knight of the Sweet's Revenge to give creatures we control +X/+X until end of turn, where X is equal to the number of foods we control. We can only activate this ability as a sorcery, but we can consider this temporary power and toughness buffing a win condition here. When Eleanor Gardner, Greta Sweet Tooth Scourge, and Gilded Goose enter the battlefield, we create a food token. At the beginning of our end step, if we sacrificed a food this turn, Eleanor allows us the option of searching our library for a basic land card and putting it onto the battlefield tapped. Greta lets us pay a green mana and sacrifice a food to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. We can only activate this ability as a sorcery. We can also pay 1 and 1 black mana and sacrifice a food to draw 1 card and lose 1 life. We can pay 1 and 1 green mana and tap Gilded Goose to create a food token as well, or we can tap it and sacrifice a food to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. We have other resource building options that are tied to foods as well. Whenever Savvy Hunter attacks or blocks, we create a food token. We can sacrifice 2 foods to draw a card. When Lobelia, Defender of Bag End, enters the battlefield, we look at the top card of each opponent's library and exile those cards face down. We can tap Lobelia and sacrifice an artifact to choose one of the following. Until end of turn, we may play a card exiled with Lobelia without paying its mana cost, or each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. With these 2 creatures, we are exchanging our foods for card advantage. For food-driven combat options, Banquet Guests and Feasting Hobbit can be major threats on the battlefield. The Guests has affinity for food, which means it costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each food we control. Since this halfling citizen has X in its mana cost, each food we control acts as 1 generic mana for paying X, and this is before we spend any actual mana for the cost of X. Banquet Guests has Trample and enters the battlefield with twice X +1/+1 counters on it. This card has tremendous value. Consider the following conservative scenario. If we control 5 foods and pay 5 mana into X, then Banquet Guests enters the battlefield with 20 +1/+1 counters on it. Pure value. Oh, and it gets better. We can pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice a food to give it indestructible until end of turn. Banquet Guests can easily one-shot an opponent in this build. Feasting Hobbit has Devour Food 3, which means as it enters the battlefield, we may sacrifice any number of foods. Feasting Hobbit comes into play with 3 times that many +1/+1 counters. Creatures with power less than Feasting Hobbit's power cannot block it. There should be very few, if any, creatures on our opponent's sides of the battlefield that can block this halfling citizen, essentially making it unblockable. For even more combat shenanigans, Motivated Pony has Trample and Haste, and whenever it attacks, attacking creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. If a food entered the battlefield under our control this turn, we untap those creatures and they get an additional +2/+2 until end of turn. Note that this ability also buffs Motivated Pony, as the text does not state other attacking creatures. At the beginning of our end step, Guillaume, Master Chef, creates a number of food tokens equal to the number of non-token creatures we had enter the battlefield under our control this turn. We can pay 1 generic mana and sacrifice a food to have target creature gain indestructible until end of turn. It also becomes tapped. Note that we do not have to target our own creatures with Guillaume's indestructible ability. We can target our opponent's creatures and tap them down for the purposes of allowing our creatures to swing in for blockerless combat. Frodo approves. As gaining life is an integral component to the theme of this build, let's include some additional ways to do so, as well as some life-gaining synergies and payoffs. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Soul Warden, Essence Warden, and Soul's Attendant gain us 1 life, while Prosperous Innkeeper gains us 1 life whenever another creature comes into play under our control. It also creates a treasure token when it enters the battlefield. Treebeard Gracious Host has Trample and Ward 2, and when it enters the battlefield, we create 2 food tokens. Whenever we gain life, we put that many +1/+1 counters on Treebeard. This 0/5 is going to get very big, very fast in this build. Speaking of getting very big, very fast, whenever we gain life, Archangel of Thune has us put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. With our propensity for gaining life in this build, we can consider these 2 creatures win conditions here. Note that when an opponent targets a creature that has Ward 2 with a spell or an ability, that opponent must pay an additional 2 generic mana, or that spell or ability is countered. Gollum, Obsessed Stalker, fittingly has Skulk, which means that creatures with greater power cannot block him. At the beginning of our end step, each opponent dealt combat damage this game by a creature named Gollum, Obsessed Stalker, loses life equal to the amount of life we gained this turn. Slipping Gollum past our opponent's defenses can yield potentially game-winning results secondary to the amount of life we can gain in this build. We can consider this version of Gollum as yet another win condition here. At the beginning of each end step, if we gained at least 3 life, the Gaffer draws us a card. Whenever Gwahir, Greatest of the Eagles, attacks, target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. At the beginning of each end step, if we gained at least 3 life this turn, we create a 3/3 white bird creature token with flying, and whenever this creature attacks, target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. Note that these abilities trigger at the beginning of each end step and not just ours. We could easily draw a ton of cards and create numerous bird creature tokens during a round of turns. For more card drawing synergies, we have Well of Lost Dreams and Dawn of Hope. Whenever we gain life, the Well allows us to pay X generic mana, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life gained. If we do, then we draw X cards. Dawn of Hope follows suit for the cost of 2 generic mana. If we pay it, then we draw a card. We can also pay 3 and 1 white mana to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. For more card advantage effects, if we would gain life, Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant, has us gain that much life +1 instead. We can pay 2 in Abzan colors, tap and exile Bilbo to search our library for any number of creature cards and put them onto the battlefield. We can only activate this ability if we have at least 111 life, which may seem unreasonable, but it is a very achievable feat in this type of build. Field-Tested Frying Pan is another card that synergizes with the life gain theme of this build. When it enters the battlefield, we create a food token, then create a 1/1 white halfling creature token and attach this equipment to it. Equipped creature has, whenever we gain life, this creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the amount of life we gained. This equipment can make a 1/1 creature a major threat in combat. Whenever we gain life, Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, has target opponent lose that much life. With his built-in lifelink enabling activated ability, Veto can cause a lot of combat headaches for our opponents. Of course, if we are crafting a life gain build with black in its color identity, then we must consider the Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood game-ending combo. Whenever we gain life, Sanguine Bond has target opponent lose that much life, and whenever an opponent loses life, Exquisite Blood gains us that much life. When these two enchantments are paired together on our side of the battlefield, once we gain at least one life, or once an opponent loses at least one life, we win the game by draining each opponent's life total 1 point at a time. To close out this video, let's include a few cards that protect our eventual Ring Bearer. Remember, Frodo's ability triggers whenever he attacks. He does not need to deal combat damage to a player in order to reap the benefits of his card drawing ability. With that in mind, Darksteel Plate, Shield of Kaldra, and Mithril Coat are indestructible and give equipped creature indestructible as well, while Hammer of Nazan gives equipped creature +2/+0 and indestructible. Note that Mithril Coat has Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, we attach it to target legendary creature we control. Also note that when Hammer of Nazan or another equipment enters the battlefield under our control, we may attach it to target creature we control. These equipment prevent the creature equipped by them from being destroyed, which allows us to send Frodo into combat safely while maintaining his presence on the battlefield. For a layer of targeted removal protection, we have Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm. The Greaves gives equipped creature haste and shroud, while the boots give it hexproof and haste. As long as the creature equipped by Champion's Helm is legendary, it also has hexproof, in addition to the static +2/+2 power and toughness boost given to any creature equipped by it. Remember, for the purposes of optimizing the ring's abilities, we need our Ring Bearer to deal combat damage to a player, which we can easily accomplish by including Whisper Silk Cloak and Bilbo's Ring. The creature equipped by the cloak cannot be blocked and has shroud, while the creature equipped by Bilbo's Ring cannot be blocked and has hexproof, as long as it is our turn, of course. As a bonus, whenever the creature equipped by Bilbo's Ring attacks alone, we draw a card and we lose 1 life. Hopefully, we will not lose any members of our playgroup as a result of playing with this build. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of an Abzan commander deck with Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, and Sam, Loyal Attendant, as the generals. The cards showcased during this video are suggested options for crafting the thematic core of a Frodo and Sam EDH deck, in addition to providing ways of optimizing this theme. Removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. In building around videos like this one, these deck components are left in the hands of each individual deck brewer. If you found this video appealing, then be sure to check out our other building around videos through the playlist on your screen. Also be sure to check out our other deck building series, and don't forget to let me know your thoughts about the core of this Frodo and Sam build in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, a channel for all things magic.